Hey guys, what's going on? It's your big dreamer and doer, G Dinero, coming to you today with another Wealthy Wednesday. And today we're going to talk about what's your time preference. But first, this is not tax, financial, legal, investment advice. It's your buddy G Dinero helping you increase your financial literacy to help put you and your family on that path to financial freedom. So with no further ado, let's jump right in. So the inspiration for today's video comes from the book Principles of Economics by Saifedean Ammous. So many of you know him as the author of the Bitcoin Standard or the Fiat Standard. He also authored a book called Principles of Economics. It's deep, guys. It's like a full-blown textbook at the end of the day. And in there, in chapter 13, he talks about time preference. He talks about time preference in money, time preference in savings, time preference in civilization, and time preference and Bitcoin. And as you can see there, I had a chance to meet Saif about 2 weeks ago out at the Bitcoin conference in Las Vegas. I went to a dinner that he sponsored, had time to sit there and really finally meet one of my heroes, so to speak, a guy that I've learned an absolute ton from. Told him I actually read Principles of Economics cover to cover twice. He said I was crazy because most people can't even get through it once. And we talked a bit about this chapter, about time preference and what an unusually low time preference I have compared to most people. So we're going to dig in and talk about what exactly time preference is. So in there, and this is an excerpt directly out of the book, in the chapter under, I believe, savings, or the subheading, the bullet point savings, he said time preference can be understood as the driver of savings and investment. Once an investment can lower their time preference to engage in activities that do not offer immediate rewards, they can choose to sacrifice present time in exchange for the future. Once they decide to forego consumption of the present goods in order to save them for the future, they are lowering their time preference even further. So he talks about how as a civilization progresses, usually it would lead to lower and lower time preferences because they believe that they'll be able to do something bigger and better in the future with their money than having to have it right away. And he also in the book talks about how as a society, America's gone the other direction. Time preferences have gone through the roof. The gotta have it now, gotta have everything, gotta keep up with the Joneses or the Smiths or whatever it is that you want to keep up with, right? And that's how things have been in the United States. And time preferences have gone through the roof, driving people into debt because they gotta have it now, even if they don't have the money to have it now. And I'm going to give you a real world example at the end, or fictional, but an example at the end that'll really open your eyes as to what I'm talking about. So let's dig in a little bit further. Time preference in economics, this is the definition, refers to the subjective value an individual places on receiving a good or service at a certain time versus receiving it later. So the value you place on it today versus receiving it later, essentially. Essentially, it's the degree to which a person prefers something today over the same thing in the future. We just said that. People with a higher time preference prioritize immediate gratification and are less patient with delayed rewards. Does this describe you? Does this describe somebody you know? How about the neighbor that lives across the street, right? And you look at him and my neighbor across the street drives 3 BMWs. The kid even has a BMW, right? We drive 3 Hyundais in my family, or I've got a Tesla now, but had 3 Hyundais at one point in our family when they had 3 BMWs. So on the surface, one would perceive that they are wealthier and happier. But what it was they just have a really high time preference. They feel like they need to keep up with the Joneses and show off that maybe the husband's making 150 grand a year, right? But that doesn't mean that you should go out and spend every bit of it and then some, driving yourself further into debt, right? If you have a low enough time preference, you say, I'll drive a nice car right now, but I'll put some money away for the future because I want to make sure that I can live equally as comfortably, if not more comfortably in the future, right? That's a low time preference. High time preference is we got to have 3 BMWs in the family because 1 BMW and a couple of Hyundais isn't good enough, right? There's a lot of factors that influence time preference. Age. Younger people are often more impatient with a higher time preference than older. They've got money all of a sudden, right? Let's say they just graduated from school, or they graduated from whether it was university or they graduated from high school. They got out, they got a job, they're making great money. Now all of a sudden they have all this money in their pocket, burning a hole in their pocket, and they've never had it before. So they're anxious to go ahead and spend it, anxious to get the things right now, right? Whereas somebody who's a little bit older has kind of lived, they've had money, they've lost money, they've had money, they've lost money, and they've said to themselves, you know what? I can temper my enthusiasm a little bit. I'll buy this now, but I'll wait on that other purchase until I have enough money to really be able to afford it, right? So that's the age factor. Income, those with higher incomes often have a lower time preference because they're more secure in their financial stability. They already realize, hey, I've got this now. I don't want to lose it. So I'll go ahead and squirrel some of it away. Whereas the person in a lower income bracket, they're just spending everything they've got oftentimes. So sometimes that's just by necessity that the lower income has a higher time preference and higher incomes have a lower time preference. Education, higher education is tied to lower time preferences. And then cultural backgrounds makes up a difference, right? Different cultures place different value on today versus tomorrow versus the future. So there are some implications when we're talking about time preference. So I went in and I looked at the 4 major areas where there's implications. One is in savings and investment. So individuals with a high, and I'm just going to read this, guys. Individuals with a high time preference may be less likely to save and invest for the future, preferring to spend their money immediately, right? So high time preference, they're lower savers. They're not saving for their future. They want to spend the money immediately. Okay, that's that's the implication on savings and investment. What about on borrowing and lending? Well, time preference plays a role there, and individuals with a high time preference may be more likely to borrow to finance immediate consumption. That was the living above the means that I was kind of talking about a slide or two ago. They need to have it right now. Even if they don't have the money for it, they need it right now. So they'll borrow and put themselves into bad debt in order to have it today, right? Versus the saver that may be the one lending them money, earning 5% interest on lending that other person money in order to have the good in the future when they have saved up all the money for that good instead of putting themselves into debt in order to buy it. Career choices. And by the way, going back to borrowing and lending, I do understand there is good debt and bad debt, right? Buying a house in 2020 when the interest rates were at 3%, that's good debt. That's good debt because they were printing money at a rate and debasing the currency at a rate of 10 to 15% per year. So you were immediately making money on your asset the minute you took on 3% debt to make 10 to 15% on the back end of things, right? So that's an example of good debt. Career choices. Time preference can influence career decisions. Some may prioritize that immediate reward over long-term growth opportunities. So you hear about these people that founded companies and they're insanely rich right now. What you don't see is the first 5 to 10 years, they may have lived dirt poor, eating soup out of a can and sleeping on the floor of the office in order to make it happen. Whereas the other person, like a doctor's a great example of that. A doctor goes to school for 10 to 12 years on average just to get out with a mountain of debt. Sure, they're then making $500,000 a year, let's say, but others may prioritize getting out of school or never even going to school in the first place and immediately going into a job. Let's say a restaurant where they can make $500 a night in a restaurant. So it's immediate gratification. It's this big money, but they're not thinking about that in 10 years, the tables are going to be flip-flopped. The doctor is doing work that they absolutely love and making 5 times as much as the person in the restaurant doing work that they're miserable doing, but the restaurant person had to have it today versus the doctor that was willing to wait to have it in the future, right? That's an example right there of a career choice and prioritizing immediate rewards over long-term growth. Same thing with the entrepreneur. I never finished that story, but the entrepreneur, they live on the floor for 10 years only to be worth millions of dollars later and be able to do and live however they want to live at that point, perhaps never even working again. And lastly, health behaviors. Time preference can impact health behaviors. Individuals who prioritize immediate gratification potentially engage in risky behaviors that can have long-term consequences. Now, this is the one area where I have a bit of a higher time preference because I engage in activities like mountain biking off the side of a hill at 30, 40 miles an hour and jumping and snowboarding and parachuting and things like that. I guess I didn't really think about the long-term consequences and the bumps and bruises I may sustain along the way, but we're talking about in health consequences, things like smoking and drinking and doing drugs. People that have a high time preference, they want to do all those things now and live it up, not realizing what the consequences could be in the future on their health. So lastly, we're going to talk here quickly about, before the example, time preference in Bitcoin. Bitcoin's an escape hatch. This is excerpted word for word out of Principles of Economics by Saifedean Ammous, chapter 13. So he says, Bitcoin is an escape hatch from monetary inflation. Unlike the vast majority of humans in the past century, Bitcoiners today are able to save for the future in a monetary medium that's protected from debasement. Debasement is the devaluation of the currency. They can expect, with relatively low uncertainty, to have their savings available in the future and to have their purchasing power increase. If money is important for time preference, we would expect to see these people differentiate themselves from their fiat peers. Fiat is, regular money, the paper money, from their fiat peers by having a lower time preference. I'm going to repeat that last one real quick. If money is important for time preference, we would expect to see these people differentiate themselves from their fiat peers by having a lower time preference. Fiat, you have a high time preference. You got to have it now. You'll put yourself into debt to do so. Bitcoiners, on the other hand, we're like, we'll stash it away. We'll squirrel away a little bit so that it will allow it to compound and grow over time so that we can have a whole lot more in the future. Now, we're going to go into a real world example here. So meet Dick. Dick invests $3,000 in GRQ. This is a shout out to James from Invest Answers, who did a little parody about GRQ one time. That's Get Rich Quick coin in 2019 at $1 a coin. So in 2019, there was all these IPOs or ICOs, initial coin offerings, right? All these little altcoins were being generated back then, and people were getting rich quick. They literally were. I mean, this really happened. Things went up 300 or 3,000%, like in this example. Some went up 10,000%, 20,000, 50,000%, right? It was outrageous how fast things went up and how the valuations weren't really tied to anything except the mania or the excitement. So Dick invests $3,000 in GRQ in 2019 at $1 a coin. So he spends $3,000, he gets 3,000 GRQ coins. It skyrockets to $100 a coin, which gives him $300,000 upon exit. So what does Dick do? He sells it immediately. He was smart. Most people would hold it thinking it's going higher, but Dick was smart. He sells it immediately and immediately dumps the money into a new Lambo because that's exactly what all the crypto bros are doing. He had to keep up with everybody else, show off his wealth. He needed it now. That's a high time preference, okay? So Dick has a high time preference. So Dick drives the car for about 5 times in the next year. Why does he limit it? Because he doesn't want to put any more miles on the car because of how expensive it is to service. He only drives it when he can show off and show everybody this Lamborghini that he got for essentially $3,000, right? He bought GRQ for $3,000. It skyrocketed to $100 a coin. He walked with $300,000 and buys a Lambo with the money, right? But he's barely driving the thing at all because of how expensive it is. Unfortunately, Dick sells the car in 2020 for $150,000, half of what he paid for it, because COVID tanked the market, and all of a sudden these exotic cars and extravagantly lavish things were worth half of what they used to be because there was nobody to buy them. Nobody had any money because, like others, he lost his job during COVID and he needed the money to live on, right? Then we have a different person here. Meet Jane. Jane also invested $3,000 in the Get Rich Quick coin. I know Jane doesn't look like the type that probably would have invested in it, but Dick told her about it. So she's like, okay, I got to get into this thing. In 2019 at $1 coin, as you know, it skyrocketed to $100 a coin, giving her $300,000 upon exit. So she also sells. But Jane's sitting there thinking about her future and that she'd really love a house one day, right? She didn't need the Lambo. She didn't need jewelry or Louis Vuitton or any, I don't even know the names of all that stuff. I mean, we live a simple life. We don't do all that stuff here. So she really wants a house one day and she's contemplating her future. Jane has a low time preference. So Jane's willing to wait. And so she invests the $300,000 into Bitcoin at $10,000 a coin. Yes, that's the price back in 2019. It was higher than that. It was up as high as 13 or 14. It was lower than that. It was down around 5. But she bought it at $10,000 a coin, giving her 30 Bitcoin, as she believes in its store of value narrative. So when COVID hit in 2020, Jane's okay, right? She's not in debt up to her eyeballs. She still has her Bitcoin savings despite it losing 2/3 of its value when Bitcoin hit $3,500 a coin in March of 2020. So she still has her 30 Bitcoin. They're no longer worth $300,000. Instead, right now, they're worth about $100,000. But she's okay, right? She's okay. So by 2021, a year later, Dick's having trouble making his house payments and he moves back in with his parents. Meanwhile, Jane's excited as her store of value Bitcoin has skyrocketed to $69,000 a coin. Her 30 Bitcoin that she bought are now worth $2.07 million. Jane sells 5 of her Bitcoin and pays $345,000 cash for a beautiful new home, achieving her dream, right? Fast forward to 2025. Dick finally moved out last year after living at home for about 4 years, saving up barely enough money for a down payment on a new home. But luckily, his new job pays him $150,000 a year. So he plunks down all the money that he just saved up on a new home and straps himself with massive house payments, because the mortgage rate at the time is 7%. So now Dick is barely able to put enough money down on a down payment for his house and straps himself with these house payments that are, let's say, $2,500 or $3,000 a month, which is right around what the average is right now for the average home in America. Jane, on the other hand, she's loving her new home that she was able to pay cash for back in 2021. She started a family. The whole family moves into her home. The home has appreciated in value. It's gone from $345,000 to $600,000 in value. And oh yeah, the remaining 25 Bitcoin that she didn't sell, it's worth $2.5 million. So now Jane has no plans to return to work, instead being a full-time stay-at-home mom. Jane is living the life of her dreams. Her husband goes to work, works part-time because they don't really need the money. They're able to both be stay-at-home parents, raising their kids as a family unit. So you ask, what's the moral of the story at the end of the day? Don't be a dick. That's the moral of the story. Don't be like him with a high time preference, guys. It's not worth it. Lower your time preference and your life will change dramatically. Bitcoin allows you to lower your time preference at the end of the day. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed this, even the little bit of humor right there at the very end. If you want to see more like this, make sure you like this video. Comment. What did you like best? What did you learn today? Make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you see more videos like this in the future. And if you want to learn technical analysis and TradingView, go book that course over at G Dinero Coaching. If you want to learn how to understand options better, go book an appointment over there. And if you want to understand all of this investing world a little bit better, book a call with me over at gdinerocoaching.com. I look forward to helping you. And you know why? Because I'm G Dinero and I'm here to help you increase your financial literacy to help set you and your family on that path to financial freedom. Have an awesome day, guys, and we'll see you next time.